Good evening. Tonight is March 12th. The time has changed, and so it is now 8 p.m., although it still feels like 7 p.m. to some of us. And tomorrow morning is going to be painful. So please, everyone, be careful. Make sure when you set your clocks forward, you plan accordingly. So it seems perfect that we have the time change on the same week that we're talking about communicating bad news. So this week in Communicating Bad News, I have some resources for you, and we're going to go over the resources and the activities for the week. Then I'm going to talk about the group activity. One of the things that I've done on the front page of, or the home of our Canvas, is there's again the link to the weekly activities, but then below that there will always be a link to the current group activity for the week. The current group activity of the week. So that'll make it a little easier, hopefully, to navigate. So let's go ahead and begin. This week, we're talking about communicating bad news. And when you do go to the module, you're going to notice that the study questions for this week involve the following. How should you analyze and plan for bad news? What are effective strategies for composing bad news messages? How should you evaluate bad news messages? And what types of bad news messages are common in business? Without a doubt, you've all either received or had to write bad news messages, and this could be anything from you were not chosen as the candidate to hire, or perhaps, no, we cannot offer you that line of credit, or a product that you were very, very loyal to is no longer available. One of the most common and liability-wise communications when it comes to business and bad news is the subject of recalls and recalls of products. So we're going to touch a little bit on those tonight. One of the resources that I do give you in in Canvas is going to be the 10 commandments of communicating bad news. So we're going to start off with that tonight. So hopefully right now you're seeing my slides, and this is the 10 commandments for communicating bad news. Firstly, thou shalt never surprise. I've been fortunate and unfortunate to be the communicator of bad news on some pretty major situations, and one of which was the actual closing of a business. And the management of the business, which was located outside of the state of California, actually in Illinois, was aware of the closing of the business around November or December of a year, and had specifically asked me to hold on to that information and not tell the employees until approximately 2 weeks before the closing, which was scheduled to be in June. That was a piece of directive and information that I myself was not comfortable with, and in expressing my concern, and it was my job to close the business, I made it perfectly clear that I was not the person to do it if that was their wish. Once I knew the information and the fate of the company, my employees would know. They can't be surprised. It's all about preparation. So when you have information, immediately the preparation starts of how best to communicate that news. And really, if done effectively, it should not come as a surprise. Once you have that information, you don't delay it as well. Now, there are going to be times in which you're communicating bad information and you don't have all the answers yet, and that's where honesty comes to play. That's when you simply say, this is what's currently occurring. I don't have all the information, but once I do, you will have it as well. You never hide the facts, and this goes both ways. You don't make up false facts. So you want to take confidence in the skill of saying, I do not have all the information. I do not want to give you false information. So once we do have information, we'll convey it to you. But the lack of information is at this time to prevent misinformation. Always put it in writing. I knew the moment that I walked into the room to communicate this news to my close to 100 faculty and staff, that the minute I said in June, we will no longer be here, nothing would be heard after that. So the importance of putting everything in writing so that there is clarity, especially in the absence of information, and or if there needs to be explicit steps followed, that is key. Always justify. There's always a reason why decisions are made. People don't have to agree with the reasons. However, they are due to have an explanation of why they were denied or why they were not chosen, and validation that perhaps, yes, we had a great pool of applicants that were all very well qualified and ready. And as were you. We simply went with the candidate that we felt was best to fit with our goals and objectives at this time. You always look for the silver lining, even when there's devastating news, such as a company closing. One of the things I often came back to, and it did end up being extremely true, is I had employees that had worked there, and that was the only place they had worked, and some of them had even gone to that high school and graduated. So it was the only life they knew. Well, this provided an opportunity for some of the employees to start to pursue interests, employment, education that they would have never otherwise considered because they were very comfortable where they were at. Always bring solutions. So if I'm communicating bad news, what are the alternatives available? If a product is not available anymore, do we have a similar product or another direction that we want to point the consumer? Thou shalt always remember all the audiences. Whenever you're communicating bad news, it's not just the clients or the employees or the staff. It is also your board, your shareholders, and the public in general. Always follow up and follow through. If people are asking for additional information and you say that you'll provide it when it is available, please do so. I found myself during those very tough days of communicating weekly, and I promised I would, and some of my communications during those weeks were actually, I have no new news. Always treat people with dignity and respect. You all know this is an excellent and imperative goal and objective for life. It especially plays true when you're communicating bad news. So these slides are available for you within Canvas. Now I'm going to take a look at some of the other resources that we've put in Canvas for you, and we're going to do a walkthrough of the module. In communicating bad news, and you look at the modules, like every week, it's going to be broken down, and I'm going to scroll down here to Chapter 6. It's going to be broken down into learning the content and then demonstrating the skills. In learning the content, I have 2 videos this week. In the first video, I'll be discussing study question 1 and 2, and then the second video, it'll be 3 and 4. For those wishing to read the script or read along, I have my slides with scripts attached here. The 10 commandments that I've just shared with you are here under 10 commandments. 7 goals is and here comes my 7 steps. It'll load in just a moment. There it is. When we keep in mind delivering bad news, there are some very, very basic goals that we have. And in this particular slide, I talk about them in a little bit more detail. Be clear and concise in order not to require additional clarification. And I've shared with you in the past that I know when I've communicated clearly, often the result is lack of communication or a need for clarification. Help the receiver understand and accept the news. Maintain trust and respect for the business and organization for the receiver. Avoid legal liability or erroneous admission of guilt or culpability. If you are in the key role of communicating bad news to your constituents and to the public, I strongly suggest having professional help, such as a public relations firm. I know I did, and it saved me a lot of time and heartache. Maintain the relationship even if a formal association is being terminated. Reduce the anxiety associated with the negative news to increase the comprehension. And again, remember, you're always simply trying to achieve that outcome. So we've got a scenario here. You are a supervisor, right? And you've been given a task of discussing repeated tardiness with an employee, Chris. Chris has frequently been late for work, and the problem has grown worse over the last 2 weeks. The tardiness is impairing not only Chris's performance, but also the entire team. Your manager has instructed you to put an end to it. The desired result is for Chris to stop his tardiness and behavior and to improve his performance. So let's talk about this. Well, you could stop by Chris's cubicle and simply say, get to work on time or you're out. You could invite Chris out to a nice lunch and let him have it. You could write Chris a stern email. You could ask Chris to come to your office and discuss the behavior with him or her privately. So probably the majority of you would choose to discuss it, and that would be the correct answer. When we talk about communicating bad news, there are some models that I've put up here for you. I spoke of recall, and there is a definitive guide to recall and the process that we go through when we have a product recall. And there are governmental agencies that deal with consumer concern and protocol. And this is the product loss protocol provided by Hartford Insurance. Great information and things to consider if you yourself are involved in a product recall case. One of the most, let's say, well-known product recalls, you might remember Toyota and the Prius incident. I've placed an example document for you here, and this was when the Prius models were being recalled. And I've put this here for your review, so you can kind of analyze how it was communicated to the owners. It was customized by the VIN of those cars that they were concerned with. So it wasn't a blanket communication. This was actually communication to the documented owners of the specific VIN numbers that were impacted by the recall. They did start by a general notice in the newspaper, and every major newspaper published across this country, asking for a certain set of instructions to be followed. This was the official letter. This notice is being sent to you in accordance with the requirements of the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act. Toyota has decided that a defect which relates to motor vehicle safety exists in certain 2004 through 2009 model year Prius vehicles. They then broke it down to what is the condition. Notice the language used. The defect is the potential for an unsecured or incompatible driver's floor mat to interfere with the accelerator pedal and cause it to get stuck in the wide open position. A stuck open accelerator pedal may result in a very high speeds and make it difficult to stop the vehicle, which could cause a crash, serious injury, or death. Toyota, not the press, not the customers, but Toyota has determined that this defect does not exist in vehicles in which driver's side floor mat is compatible with the vehicle and properly secured. What will Toyota do? To make it less likely that an unsecured or incompatible driver's mat can interfere with the accelerator pedal, the Toyota dealer will remedy your vehicle at no charge to you. The remedy will entail modifying the accelerator pedal. If your vehicle is equipped with a set of optional, genuine Toyota all-weather floor mats, it will be inspected to determine if the AWFM set is of an older design. If it is, the older design for the driver and the front seat passenger will be replaced and newly designed ones at no charge to you. Before the vehicle is returned to you, Toyota will inspect the driver's carpet and will clean it if necessary at no charge to you. What should you do? And then it breaks it down. Then it has the website to visit regarding the floor mats in concern. This is what to do if you experience interference. This is what to do if you have questions. What to do if you've already paid for modifications. And again, this was the U.S. Sales Division. Review this document and see what you think. It is a good example of clear communication. However, you'll notice quite a bit of protection was involved when it comes to their liability in this particular piece of communication, and no blame was ever assumed. So now let's talk about the activities for this week. In my BCom labs, you have the warm-up, the DSM, writing negative video, which is 4.5 minutes. Then you have a simulation and then 2 document makeovers and the quiz. That's your my BCom lab. The next link takes you to my BCom lab. In your graded discussion this week, you're going to identify a situation that required you to share bad news in the past. Were you successful in accomplishing the potential encounterable goals, such as being clear and maintaining goodwill? If so, how did you do that? And if not, how could you have managed those goals based after reading this chapter? In your written activity this week, it's based upon key concepts, number 1. And in key concepts, number 1, it's asking you to develop some question contents. I did put a little hint here. This scenario is difficult since you are only assuming that the employee damaged the tape. Nobody else did. It may be that the tape was damaged when the customer brought it in. Thus, you do not want to take full responsibility. So just kind of a hint as answering this question. Then finally, there's the quiz. So those are the activities for this week when it comes to communicating bad news. I'm going to go home, and when I go home, I'm going to follow the link to the group activity for this week. You have your initial activity, which is your team and resources document that's been created. Now you're going to use the Google folders to create a letter. This week, you will work with your team to author a letter of introduction and a request to provide a 5 to 7 minute presentation to the Biz 310 class at American River College. Key items that must be included: well-organized letter of introduction, request to present to the audience with details as to the content, that means the date and time as well, courtesy closing, and call for action, such as please email for confirmation. You're going to use the Google Docs to compose the letter so that the team members can all be involved in the process. And please make sure that there are faux signatures. Do not use your real electronic signatures, please, are included in the letter. I've provided an example here, as well as an example in the master files of Google. An example master letter would look something like this. This is Nintendo's team presentation, and notice courtesy opening. Work experience is very valuable for students and to have once they've completed their education and are looking to start their career. Nintendo is committed to helping students gain on their job experience through internships. We would appreciate an opportunity to reach out to your students and inform them of what is available to them. Our presentation team is prepared to provide a 5 to 7 minute speech on December 13th, etc., etc. The presentation would include, and then finally, what to do. Please contact me for the presentation for December or schedule for another day that best suits you. Thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Then I want you to have the faux signatures of your entire team. Please remember that you want to make sure to use the ARC Los Rios Gmail login to access the shared drive. When you look at the spring 2017 Biz 310 group space, you'll see the folders for all of your groups. Make sure all of your documents stay in those groups. If you look at master documents, that's where every week I'll put an example. So for example, this week, the letter of interest, very similar to the one that you've noticed in the Dropbox area. With little faux signatures. I'll create just a new document very, very quickly. And when you create your signatures, simply use the online feature of Insert, Drawing. This allows all of you to simply use the drawing tools, such as Scribble, to scribble your signature and then embed in your document. Remember, all of these, you can use your wrap text so you can float it. I recommend that you have 0 margins. In addition, if you're formatting any of the features on this, make sure that there is no fill and no border, so it simply appears as if it's floating in your document. That's for your letter this week. Again, make sure you log in. When you're ever in a file, make sure you're using such features such as commenting on a document or leaving notes on a document. So you may not be changing somebody else's work, but perhaps you're selecting and making suggestions. Select the area using comments, and you can add new comments at any time. That way you can follow and read each other's comments. Everyone that has this link should be already shared. You should not need to add any sharing to anybody in your group. They should all already have access. So this week, from the home, we're working on Chapter 6. And in Chapter 6, it's communicating bad news. Your group activity for the week is composing of one letter, introducing your group, and requesting to present. So that's all the information for this week. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, but then hang out for a little bit for those of you who have specific questions.